2 weeks before my ex-wife's wedding, she sent me a text message that I read 3 times before I believed it. "Your son can't come. He'll ruin the photos." Ethan had been counting down the days for months. He'd circled the date on the dinosaur calendar on his bedroom wall. He'd already picked out his clip-on tie, a navy blue one we'd found together at Target on a Saturday morning in January. When I told him, he didn't cry. He went completely silent, the kind of quiet that's worse than any crying, and then he reached into his backpack and pulled out a handwritten invitation his mother had given him 6 months earlier, before she'd even met her new fiancé. His name was written on it in her loopy cursive, his full name. He held it like he was waiting for it to explain itself. I called her calmly. I told her I was bringing him anyway. She told me if I showed up, she'd take me to court. I smiled. She couldn't see that, of course, but I smiled and I said, "About that. My lawyer wants to show the judge something. Your own words were," and her face went pale. "I know because I was already parked outside. Let me tell you how we got here, because this didn't start 2 weeks before that wedding. This started 6 years ago, in a conference room on the 14th floor of a building on Michigan Avenue in Chicago, where I sat across from my then-husband's divorce attorney and realized for the first time that I was completely, catastrophically unprepared. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Someone had left a half-full coffee cup on the windowsill. I remember staring at it while her attorney read from a document in a voice that implied I was an inconvenience he'd rather not deal with. I was 31 years old. I had a part-time administrative job at a dental office that paid me $28,000 a year. I had a 2017 Honda Civic with a cracked rear taillight. And I had Ethan, who was 4 years old and still needed someone to cut his grapes in half. That was my entire inventory. That was everything I had when Diana, my ex-wife, though we had been married 5 years and together for 7, decided she was done. I want to be fair about something, because this story isn't really about hate. Diana wasn't a monster when we were together. She was charming and ambitious, and she made everyone feel like the most interesting person in the room. That was the gift and the curse of being with her. She collected people. When she was done collecting you, she moved on. I just didn't know I'd been collected until the collection phase was over. We'd met in 2013 at a rooftop party in Wicker Park, the kind of party where everyone is a creative professional and nobody admits they're still paying off student loans. I was 24 and working as an account coordinator at a mid-sized marketing firm called Brannigan & Lowe. Diana was 27 and already a senior project manager at a tech company called Mosaic Systems. She made $94,000 a year. She told me this on our second date, not to brag, at least, that's what I thought then, but to establish something. I understand now that she was running an audit, evaluating assets. We got married in September 2015 at a venue in the Pilsen neighborhood, outdoor ceremony, string lights, the whole thing. I was 26. Ethan came in 2019. And by 2021, Diana had been promoted to VP of Operations at Mosaic, was making somewhere north of $180,000 annually, and had developed what I can only describe as a quiet contempt for everything I was and wasn't. "You're not really a career person," she said once, on a Wednesday night in March of 2021, while we were standing in the kitchen of our condo on West Wrightwood Avenue. She said it the way you'd observe that it was raining outside. Factually, like it explained everything. I was making $33,000 by then, I'd gotten a raise at the dental office, and I was taking 2 online courses through DePaul University's business program in the evenings after Ethan went to bed. I didn't tell her about the courses. Even then, something in me knew not to show her what I was building. "I'm figuring it out," I said. She nodded slowly, in a way that meant she didn't think there was much left to figure. The divorce was filed in August 2021. I moved out of the condo on West Wrightwood with Ethan, my clothes, a sectional sofa that had been mine before we married, and $4,200 in a checking account. Diana kept the condo, the investment account with roughly $67,000 in it that we'd built together, and, most importantly, the narrative. In her version, she'd supported a partner who couldn't keep up, and eventually had to make a difficult but necessary decision. In the version she told her friends, her colleagues, her sister Becca, who I'd always actually liked, I was the one who hadn't tried hard enough. I hadn't grown with her. It was sad, really. The divorce settlement gave me $1,100 a month in child support, primary custody of Ethan, and a legal bill from my attorney, a decent but overworked woman named Sandra Park, That came to $8,400 when everything was finalized. I paid it in installments over 14 months. But there was something Diana didn't know about me. About what I'd been doing in those nighttime hours after Ethan was asleep, and she thought I was watching Netflix. I'd been making calls. I'd been reading. I had spent the better part of 18 months educating myself, quietly, methodically, in a way that felt private in the same way a person's prayers feel private. Not because it was shameful, because it was mine. By October 2021, 6 weeks after the divorce was finalized, I had already registered for a business development certification course through the University of Illinois Extension program. By December 2021, I had passed the first 2 modules with a 94 average. And by February 2022, I'd had 3 conversations with a woman named Carol Mendes, a small business consultant I'd found through a neighborhood Facebook group, who charged $150 an hour and was worth every single cent. "You have skills people will pay for," Carol told me during our second session, sitting in a corner booth at a coffee shop on North Clark Street called Daily Press. She had a yellow legal pad covered in her own handwriting, notes from our first session. "You managed client accounts at Brannigan for 4 years. You know project workflows, client communication, budget tracking. You don't need another degree. You need a structure." I was 32 years old, and someone was describing my professional value back to me, and I almost cried into my drip coffee. The structure Carol recommended was straightforward. Establish an LLC, position myself as a freelance operations consultant for small and mid-sized businesses, and charge a retainer fee instead of hourly rates to create consistent revenue. She walked me through the basics of the articles of incorporation, the importance of an operating agreement, and why I needed a separate business bank account before I had a single client. I filed the LLC paperwork on March 3, 2022. Meridian Operations Consulting, LLC. I paid the state filing fee of $150 and set up a business checking account at Chase with an initial deposit of $500. I had $1,847 in my personal account at the time. By May 2022, I had 2 clients. A boutique residential real estate agency in Lincoln Park called Hartwell Properties and a small orthodontics group with 3 locations in the north suburbs. Combined monthly retainer, $3,400. It was the most money I'd ever generated on my own in my life, and I didn't tell a single person. Not my mother, not my sister Renata, not my friend Priya, who would have celebrated with me. I kept it sealed, partly because I was afraid of jinxing it. Partly because something about being seen before I was ready felt dangerous in a way I couldn't articulate, and partly because Diana had been very thorough in her debrief. She hadn't been cruel about the divorce, she was too strategic for cruelty, but she'd been clear. And her clarity had gotten into the people around her before the ink was dry. There was a dinner at my mother-in-law's house, former mother-in-law, I should say, in November 2021, 3 months post-divorce. I was still technically on speaking terms with Eileen, Diana's mother, a woman who wore Eileen Fisher exclusively and had opinions about everything. I'd brought Ethan to see her because she loved him and I thought that mattered. I still think it mattered. "Diana tells me you're going back to basics," Eileen said at the dinner table, passing me a bowl of roasted Brussels sprouts with the tone of someone offering charity. Ethan was in the other room watching Blue Eye. "Something like that," I said. "She said you're thinking about going back to the dental office full-time." I'd left the dental office in September 2021, 2 weeks before the divorce was finalized, because it wasn't going anywhere and I knew it. I said nothing about that. "I'm exploring some options," I said. Eileen nodded in a way that telegraphed she thought my options were limited. "She worries about Ethan, about stability." I put a Brussels sprout in my mouth and chewed. That dinner lasted 3 hours. I drove home along Lake Shore Drive with Ethan asleep in the backseat and the windows cracked, and I felt something solidify in my chest. Not anger. Determination has a different texture than anger. Anger is hot and loose. This was cold and structured. By September 2022, Meridian's monthly revenue had reached $11,200. I'd added 4 more clients, including a medium-sized logistics company called Bridgepoint Freight that had found me through a referral from Hartwell Properties. I had hired my first contractor, a virtual assistant named Deb, who worked out of Tucson and billed me $1,200 a month. and I had enrolled in a 6-week executive communication course at the Kellogg School of Management's continuing education program. I almost got caught that fall. It was a Sunday in October 2022. Renata, my sister, had come over for dinner, pasta and garlic bread, Ethan doing homework at the kitchen table, and she'd picked up my laptop to look at something on Netflix, and the screen woke up to my business email inbox. 14 unread messages, several with client names in the subject lines. "What's Bridgepoint Freight?" she asked. I crossed the kitchen in 4 steps and took the laptop from her hands faster than I meant to. "Work thing," I said. "Sorry, I have some confidential client communications on here." Renata looked at me for a moment with the slightly squinted expression she'd had since childhood when she thought I was lying. "I thought you weren't working right now." "I picked up some freelance administrative stuff," I said. "Nothing dramatic, just keeping busy." She accepted this. I put the laptop in my bedroom and closed the door. My hands were shaking slightly when I came back to the pasta. By January 2023, Meridian's annual revenue had hit $187,000 for the prior year. I retained a CPA named Howard Yoon, whose office was in a nondescript building on West Diversey Avenue and who had 17 years of experience working with small business owners. Howard charged $2,400 annually for his services and was constitutionally incapable of unnecessary conversation, which I found deeply comforting. He set up my business taxes properly, explained the difference between pass-through taxation and corporate structuring, and told me matter-of-factly in our February 2023 meeting that if revenue continued at current projections, I would clear $240,000 in 2023. I sat in his office chair, a utilitarian black thing with a cracked armrest, and looked at the numbers on his screen and thought about a leaner passing me the Brussels sprouts. Diana called me that spring, April 2023. Not about anything legal, the custody arrangement had been smooth, she was consistent with the schedule, to be fair, but she'd called to tell me she'd started seeing someone. A man named Fletcher, which is a name I had to hear 3 times before I accepted it as real. Fletcher Crane. He was 41, divorced, no kids, in commercial real estate. "I wanted you to hear it from me," she said. "Okay," I said. "Ethan will meet him eventually." "I want that to go well." "Okay," I said. There was a pause. I could hear her waiting for more from me, some emotion she could catalog and file. "Are you doing all right?" she asked. Her voice had that particular quality she used when she wanted to seem generous. "Yes," I said. "I really am." She seemed mildly disappointed. "Good, that's good." I hung up and went back to the operations agreement I'd been reviewing for a new client. The proposal from Fletcher came in October 2023. Diana called it an announcement. They were getting married in June 2024, and they'd found a venue in the North Shore, the kind of lakeside property that charges $12,000 just to walk through the gate, and it was going to be elegant and intentional, and everything she'd apparently been planning since before she'd technically ended our marriage. Ethan came home from his weekend visit in October carrying a small card envelope. Inside was a handwritten invitation, his name in her loopy cursive, the date, the venue. A personal note at the bottom that said she wanted him there, that it would mean everything to her. He put it on his dresser between his Lego sets. He looked at it sometimes. I watched this and felt complicated things, which I did not examine at length because I had a business to run. I didn't know that same October, Diana had consulted a family law attorney about modifying the custody arrangement, not because anything had changed in Ethan's care. Because Fletcher had opinions about what a blended family should look like, and those opinions were apparently incompatible with the current schedule. By March 2024, Meridian Operations Consulting had a team of 6 contractors, 2 full-time employees, and a client roster that included 11 businesses ranging from a boutique law firm in River North to a regional distribution company with offices in 3 states. Annual projected revenue was $410,000. I had moved out of the apartment I'd been renting in Logan Square and purchased a 3-bedroom condo in Lincoln Park, the same neighborhood as Hartwell Properties, which had become my anchor client, for $618,000. I paid $150,000 down and financed the rest through a conventional mortgage at a rate I'd locked in during a brief dip that Howard had flagged for me. I told my mother about the condo. Her response was, "Lincoln Park. That's very expensive, are you sure?" "Yes," I said. Diana's in Lincoln Park, she said, as if I didn't know where my ex-wife lived. It's a big neighborhood, I said. She asked who was helping me with the mortgage. I told her I had a financial advisor. She asked if I needed money. I said no. There was a silence in which she recalibrated her entire model of my situation without fully accepting the new data. Well, she said, just be careful. I was already careful. Careful was the only thing I'd been for 2.5 years. The close call I remember most vividly happened in April 2024, 6 weeks before the wedding. Diana had dropped Ethan off on a Sunday and come inside for a moment. She'd never been inside my new condo. This was the first time, ostensibly to discuss something about Ethan's upcoming school schedule. She stopped in the entryway and looked around. The space was clean and well-furnished. I'd bought a sectional from West Elm. There were framed prints on the walls. Everything was orderly and considered. Something shifted behind her eyes, a micro-expression I recognized from 7 years of marriage. Recalibration. Nice place, she said carefully. Thank you. The freelance admin stuff must be going well, she said, not asking, testing. It's fine, I said. Can I get you something, water? No. She looked at the kitchen, the Viking range I'd had installed when I moved in, and then looked back at me. How are you affording this? I smiled. Carefully, I said. She left 5 minutes later with a look on her face that I recognized as the early formation of a plan. I called my lawyer the next morning. Her name was Janet Reyes, a family law and business attorney I'd been working with for 14 months. I told her to make sure everything was in order. Everything's in order, Janet said. Has something changed? Not yet, I said. The text message came on May 15, 2024, 3 weeks before the wedding. I was in a client meeting at the Bridgepoint Freight office in Elk Grove Village when my phone buzzed. I finished the meeting, walked to my car, a 2023 Volvo XC60 in Onyx Black that I'd leased in January, and sat in the parking lot and read it. Hey, I've been thinking about the wedding. I think it's better if Ethan doesn't come. Things are going to be intense, and I don't want him in the middle of it. He'll understand when he's older. I read it twice. He'll understand when he's older. I drove to pick Ethan up from school that afternoon. When he climbed into the car, navy backpack, one shoe half untied, I waited until we were moving to say anything. Hey, bud, your mom sent me a message today. He looked up from his iPad. She's thinking you might not come to the wedding, I said, keeping my voice completely level. That things might be complicated that day. He didn't cry. He turned back to the iPad, then turned it face down on his lap. Then he reached into his backpack. He had the invitation in there, in the envelope, slightly bent at one corner from months of being carried. He held it with both hands and looked at it without saying anything. The room in my car got very quiet. Does she not want me there? He asked. I don't know yet, I said. I'm going to find out. That evening, after Ethan was in bed, I called Diana. My phone showed the call beginning at 8:43 p.m. I was sitting at my kitchen island with a glass of water and Janet's cell number pulled up on my other line. Diana answered on the third ring. Hey, she said. Her voice was carefully casual. I got your text, I said. I figured you would. He's been looking forward to this for 6 months, I said. He has the invitation on his dresser. He's picked out what he's going to wear. I know, and I feel terrible about it, but honestly the dynamics at this wedding are going to be. I'm bringing him, I said, a pause, 2 seconds too long. I don't think that's a good idea, she said. Her voice had shifted. The careful casualness was gone. He is your son, I said. He has a right to be there if he wants to be. It's my wedding, Diana said, and her voice had gone sharp now, the way it went when she was done negotiating and starting to command. And I'm telling you, if you bring him, I will call my attorney and we will be in front of a judge before the week is out. I let the threat sit there for a moment. About that, I said. My lawyer wants to show the judge something, your own words actually, from the custody modification filing you opened in October. Complete silence. You didn't know I knew about that, I said. She didn't answer. I'm parked outside, I said. She hung up. I sat in my car for another 3 minutes. Then I went inside, made Ethan's lunch for the next day, and sent Janet a text that said, it's time. The custody modification hearing was scheduled for June 6, 2024, 4 days before the wedding. It hadn't been Diana's idea to schedule it then. That was Janet's maneuvering. She'd filed a countermotion in May, when she received notification of Diana's original modification request. And she'd structured the countermotion to include Ethan's right to attend significant family events as defined in the original divorce agreement, the invitation as evidence of prior explicit invitation and revocation, and a request for judicial review of the modification filing's stated grounds, which were, Janet pointed out in language that was pleasant but devastating, almost entirely pretextual. The courthouse was on West Washington Street downtown. I'd been there once before, during the divorce. It smelled the same, industrial cleaner and old paper. Janet met me in the lobby at 9:15 a.m. wearing a gray blazer and carrying a leather folder that I knew contained 3 separate stacks of documents arranged in a specific order that she'd explained to me over the phone the previous evening. Diana was already there with her attorney, a man named Craig Whitfield who had an excellent reputation and extremely expensive shoes. Diana was wearing a dove gray dress that she'd clearly chosen with care. She looked composed and deliberate and exactly like herself. She saw me come in and her expression did something complicated. Fletcher was not present. I had not expected him to be. We sat on opposite sides of the waiting area for 27 minutes. Nobody spoke. Diana typed on her phone. I sat with my hands in my lap and my back straight and watched the clock on the wall. The hearing room was smaller than I'd imagined. Judge Patricia Holden had been on the family court bench for 11 years. She had reading glasses on a chain around her neck and the energy of someone who had heard every possible argument and remained unimpressed by all of them. We're here on the matter of a custody modification request filed by Ms. Diana Crane, the clerk said, using Diana's newly assumed married name even though the wedding hadn't happened yet. Janet had noted this to me as an interesting strategic choice on Diana's part. Whitfield opened. He was smooth and well-paced. Diana, he explained, had recently married, or was about to marry, and was seeking to adjust the existing custody arrangement to better accommodate the needs of a blended family situation. The current arrangement, he suggested, created scheduling friction that was increasingly untenable. Judge Holden looked at the paperwork. "Ms. Park," she said to Janet. Janet's name was Janet Reyes, actually. The judge had glanced at the wrong line. "Reyes," Janet said pleasantly. "Janet Reyes, and Your Honor, I'd like to begin by entering 3 items into the record." Whitfield glanced up. Janet placed the first document on the table. "This is the existing custody agreement from the 2021 divorce settlement, which grants my client primary physical custody of the minor child, Ethan, with a clearly defined visitation and decision-making framework." She paused. "The second document is a copy of a written invitation, in Ms. Crane's own handwriting, extending Ethan a personal, named invitation to attend her upcoming wedding on June 10th. Diana's hand, which had been resting on the table, went very still. "The third document," Janet said, and her voice remained exactly even, is a screenshot of a text message sent to my client on May 15th of this year, at 2:47 p.m., in which Ms. Crane informed my client that Ethan, quote, can't come to the wedding because he'll ruin the photos. The room was very quiet. Judge Holden picked up the third document. She read it. She set it down. "Counselor," she said, looking at Whitfield, "the stated grounds for this modification request reference scheduling friction and the needs of a blended family. Can you help me understand how those grounds connect to excluding the child from his own mother's wedding?" Whitfield shifted in his chair. "Your Honor, the text message was taken somewhat out of context." "It seems fairly self-contained," Judge Holden said. I watched Diana's face. The color had started to drain, beginning at the jaw and moving upward. She leaned toward Whitfield and whispered something. He put a hand up slightly, not quite patting her arm, the gesture of an attorney managing a client. "Furthermore," Janet continued, "the modification request was filed in October of 2023, contemporaneously with my client's relocation to a new residence and a period of professional advancement that Ms. Crane appears to have become aware of. I have documentation here, financial records for Meridian Operations Consulting, LLC, registered March 2022, establishing that my client has, over the past 2 years, built a consulting business with current annual revenue of approximately $410,000. Diana's head turned toward me. Slowly, the way a person's head turns when they've heard a number that doesn't compute. "I'd like to enter these business records. this year's projected revenue statement, and my client's mortgage documentation for her Lincoln Park property, purchased in March of 2024, as Exhibit D, Janet said. Whitfield sat back in his chair, not leaning forward anymore. The relevance, Janet explained to Judge Holden, whose expression suggested she was already tracking this, is that Ms. Crane's modification request, on examination, appears to coincide precisely with her awareness of my client's improving financial and professional circumstances. The stated grounds, scheduling friction, do not reflect any change in the child's actual routine, academic performance, or well-being, all of which I have documentation for as well. She placed a fourth stack on the table. Diana's voice came out tight, higher than usual. This isn't about her business. Judge Holden looked at her over the reading glasses. Ms. Crane, your attorney will speak for you. Diana pressed her lips together. The paper in front of her, something she'd been holding since we sat down, gave a faint crinkle. Her hand was shaking slightly. Whitfield tried to recover. He was good. He pivoted to arguments about stability and consistency and the adjustment period of a new family dynamic. He was articulate and professional, and it didn't matter because the text message was sitting on the table in front of the judge and nobody in the room could think about anything else. He'll ruin the photos, Judge Holden said quietly, half to herself, looking at the document again. Nobody spoke for 4 full seconds. I heard someone's phone buzz in the hallway outside. Ms. Reyes, the judge said, what is your client requesting? Dismissal of the modification request, Janet said, and a court order confirming Ethan's right to attend the June 10th wedding as originally invited, should he choose to. Your Honor, that's overreach, Whitfield started. It's actually quite narrow, Janet said pleasantly. Judge Holden removed her reading glasses and set them on the chain. She looked at Diana directly. Ms. Crane, you sent your son a handwritten, personal invitation to your wedding 6 months ago. You then sent his father a text message, less than a month before the event, stating he couldn't attend because of photographs. She paused. And you filed a modification request, the stated grounds of which do not appear to have a basis in any documented change in the child's circumstances. In the same period, you became aware that his primary custodial parent had experienced significant professional success. Another pause. Is there anything you'd like to add to the record? Diana looked at her attorney. He looked at his paperwork. His shoes were very expensive and completely useless. No, Diana said, very quietly. The modification request is dismissed, Judge Holden said. She wrote something in the file. I'm also entering a notation recommending that both parties engage in co-parenting communication with a family mediator before bringing any future modification requests, given the pattern of communication documented here. She looked up. Is that understood? Yes, Your Honor, Janet said. Yes, Diana said. Her voice was barely audible. Judge Holden stood, and the clerk said something procedural, and the room began to reorganize itself, and I sat very still for a moment because my hands had stopped shaking somewhere in the middle of Janet reading the exhibit list, and I had only just noticed. Janet touched my elbow as we stood. Ready. Yes, I said. As we filed out, I passed Diana in the narrow space near the door. She was gathering papers. Fletcher still wasn't there. Whitfield was talking to her in a low, controlled voice. She looked up as I passed, and what I saw on her face was not the expression I'd expected. It wasn't anger. It wasn't contempt. It was the look of someone who had made a very serious miscalculation and was only now calculating the full extent of it. Ethan is a good kid, I said quietly. Just to her, not to Whitfield or the room or anyone watching, just to her. He really was looking forward to it. She didn't answer. I walked out into the courthouse hallway and then out through the heavy doors into the June morning, which was warm and smelled like cut grass from somewhere nearby, and I stood on the steps for a moment and breathed. Janet came out behind me, leather folder under her arm. The wedding's in 4 days, she said. Do you want to take him? I'll ask him, I said. It's his choice. Ethan chose not to go. He told me this on a Thursday evening, sitting at the kitchen island with a bowl of cereal he wasn't really eating. He said it in the way he said most important things, matter-of-factly, without drama, like he'd already finished thinking about it. I don't really want to go anymore, he said. Is that okay? It's completely okay, I said. Are you mad at her? He asked. I thought about this honestly. Not really, I said. Not anymore. He ate some cereal. She texted me, he said. She said she was sorry. What did you say? I said it was okay. He looked up. Is it okay if it's okay? Yes, I said. That's yours to decide. He put the invitation in his desk drawer. Not on the dresser anymore. In the drawer. I noticed this and said nothing about it. Diana did not appeal the court's ruling. The modification request was formally dismissed on June 8th, 2 days before the wedding, and Whitfield's office sent Janet a brief communication indicating that Ms. Crane had no intention of pursuing the matter further at this time. At this time. Janet had underlined those 3 words when she forwarded it to me. In the months that followed, I heard through Ethan, not through gossip, not through anyone's deliberate report, that the wedding had been smaller than planned. That some guests had declined at the last minute. That Fletcher, whose name I had finally accepted as real, had business complications that emerged around the same time as the courthouse proceedings, because in a city the size of Chicago, professional circles are smaller than they appear, and a court filing that mentions a $410,000 consulting business in connection with a dismissed modification request has a way of circulating. I don't know if any of that is connected. I didn't make any calls. By the end of 2024, Meridian Operations Consulting had closed its best year yet, $487,000 in revenue, 11 full-time contractors, a new partnership with a regional healthcare administration group based in Milwaukee. Howard updated my projections in December and said the words seven-figure potential with the same flat affect he used for everything, which somehow made it more convincing. Ethan got on the honor roll in 5th grade. He took the invitation out of the desk drawer once, looked at it, and put it in the recycling. He didn't mention it afterward. I didn't either. My mother came to see the condo in November and stood in the kitchen looking at the Viking range for a long time before she said, "I should have asked more questions." "It's okay," I said. "I assumed," she said. "I know," I said. She stayed for dinner. We talked about other things. For several months after that, everything was genuinely quiet. Co-parenting communications went through a mediator named Dr. Lynn Abramovitz, whose office was in Evanston, and they were civil and brief and functionally adequate. Diana and I did not see each other except at school events where we sat in different rows and nodded when proximity required it. Fletcher remained abstract to me, a name and a set of business complications. Ethan seemed fine. He joined a robotics club. He stopped carrying the navy clip-on tie in his backpack. I thought we were done. Then yesterday morning, at 7:22 a.m., Janet called. I was making coffee when my phone lit up with her name. Janet does not call before 9 unless something has happened. "Hey," I said. "Diana's attorney contacted us late last night," she said. "They're claiming the business records we submitted in the June hearing were incomplete. They're suggesting Meridian had undisclosed assets at the time of the original 2021 divorce settlement. They've retained a forensic accountant." I set down my coffee mug. "They're filing a motion to reopen financial disclosures from the divorce," Janet said, "on the grounds that you deliberately concealed business interests during settlement negotiations." The kitchen was very quiet. Outside, I could hear the street noise from Lincoln Park, a truck, someone's dog, the city just starting its day. "The LLC was registered March 2022, I said, 7 months after the divorce was finalized. "I know that," Janet said. "Their accountant is going to argue the groundwork was laid earlier. That there are pre-divorce communications or financial activity that indicate prior planning." I thought about the night courses through DePaul. The conversations with Carol Mendes, which had begun in late 2021. The note in my personal journal from October of 2021, a plain moleskine I still had in the top drawer of my nightstand, where I'd written the name Meridian for the first time, circled it, and written beneath it, "This is what comes next." "Janet," I said. "Yeah." I have everything documented. Every conversation with Carol, the DePaul enrollment records, the LLC filing date, the first client contracts, Howard's earliest tax filings. "Good," she said. "And I have something else," I said. I opened the drawer next to the refrigerator, the one where I keep things I might need again, and pulled out a small flash drive. There was a date written on it in permanent marker. October 14th, 2021. The recording from the session with Carol Mendes, where I'd explained exactly where I was financially at the time and what I was hoping to build, with timestamps and her professional notes attached. I'd started recording my financial consultations in October 2021 on Carol's advice, actually. She'd suggested it for my own records so I could review the sessions later and track how my thinking was evolving. I'd been waiting, without knowing I was waiting, for exactly this. "Tell Whitfield's office," I said, "that we're happy to do full financial disclosure." Janet was quiet for a moment. "You have something," she said. "I have everything," I said. "So, what do you think? Did Diana go too far, or did she finally get exactly what she'd set in motion? Let me know in the comments and subscribe because the forensic accountant part of this story is just getting started."